Welcome to Wokout. I'm your host, Andrew Wokout. On the edge of a historic sit-down between President Donald Trump and North Korean tyrant Kim Jong-un, President Trump has chosen to make a major change at the State Department. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is out, and CIA Director Mike Pompeo has been nominated to move from the CIA to state. Look, if we're being honest, Rex Tillerson kinda, sorta, how you say, didn't seem to have his heart in it. I mean, he didn't want to scrap the Iran nuclear deal, and he seemed to be at odds with the president on many issues. But the so-called experts on some of the other networks are jumping up and down and throwing themselves on the floor, clutching their pearls over the many departures from the White House, including Gary Cohn. Right. Maybe we should continue with the status quo of having people burrow themselves into administration or big government and stay as long as they like, even if they're ineffective at their jobs or outright disagree with the president on his agenda. You know, do this just to keep up appearances, as it were. Well, Mike Pompeo gave an interview at Fox News Sunday where he was asked if there would be any preconditions for the meeting. And here's what he said.
Should there be preconditions for such a meeting?
Well, gentlemen, I think it's important to step back to remember how we got to this place. For an awfully long time, America whistled past the graveyard while the North Korean regime, including this particular leader, continued to develop their nuclear weapons program. This administration came in, the president talked about it in his campaign, and put enormous pressure on the North Korean economy and on the North Korean leadership. That gave us this opportunity where Kim Jong-un now has committed to stopping nuclear testing, stopping missile tests, allowing exercises to go forward, something that's been incredibly contentious in the past, and at the same time saying that denuclearization, complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization is a topic for discussion. And that's when Kim Jong-un said, I'd like to meet with the president. The president made the decision that was the right time to begin that conversation.
Right you are, sir. Maintaining the status quo has proved to be a failure. I mean, the past three administrations literally did nothing to stop the North Korean nuclear program. Nothing. You know, academics and think tanks writing policy papers, driving sanctions have failed. But without fail, the media is sneering at Trump in advance of his meeting. And of course, leading the way, no surprise, is the New York Times. And here's their headline. How Trump's disdain for the Iran deal makes North Korea pact even harder. Quote, the ironies abound, said Robert S. Litwack, the director of international security studies at the Woodrow Wilson Center for International Scholars and the author of Preventing North Korea's Nuclear Breakout. The man who wrote The Art of the Deal has staked out a position that the Iran deal was the worst one in history. And he added, now he has to show that he can do much better with a far harder case. Wow, this guy's smarter than all of us put together, and he's got charts and graphs to prove it. Then there's the boy wonder from the Obama years. Remember Ben Rhodes? Well, until he became Barack Obama's speechwriter and later trusted advisor on foreign policy, he had absolutely no experience in, well, anything. But here he is, mocking the president on Meet the Press.
If President Trump were to call you and ask you, now I don't think this is going to happen, but just if he were to call you, maybe he's watching right now, what would your advice be going into this meeting with Kim Jong-un?
Well, the concern I have is, look, this is not a real estate deal or a reality show. When you're in a negotiation with something as complex as a North Korean nuclear program and a situation that is volatile as the Korean Peninsula, you need diplomats. So advice one is don't hollow out the State Department. They have no ambassador to Seoul. The person who was in charge of North Korea negotiations just left the State Department. So one, get the professionals in the room to put together a strategy. Second, you need to value science. Another thing that this administration has not valued. When we did the Iran negotiations, we had a nuclear physicist, Ernie Moniz, in the negotiation. If you're dealing with the complexity of how to put constraints on a nuclear program, you need those experts. So there needs to be a team of diplomats, of scientists, of sanctions experts who are all supporting this negotiation. It cannot just be a mano-a-mano show with Kim Jong-un. That's not going to yield results.
Wait, Trump should bring a team of diplomats. tense, Captain Obvious. Wow. Who would have thought that up without you? Writing short stories about losers in garden departments and imagining that he would soon be published in literary magazines makes you the real go-to guy on this. And by the way, that's actually a quote about Rhodes from a bio piece in the New York Times. And here's the truth. Thug leaders only respond to one thing: the threat of a power greater than their own. So here's a word you may not have heard before applied to North Korean Kim Jong-un. And the word is savage. The North Korean government is a savage regime. North Korea is a territorial prison. Kim Jong-un goes to sleep every night knowing that his government starves its own people as a means of control. You see, our military is an agent of our freedom. His military is the agent of repression. Now, the problem for Democrats and even some Republicans is that Trump's, as they called bluster, which they all said was baiting North Korea to launch missiles against us and our allies, seems to be the only reason why Kim Jong-un is ready to sit down and actually negotiate. Think about the burn the so-called experts will feel if President Trump can succeed where all others have failed. Joining me now is former Green Beret commander and founding member of Delta Force and Undersecretary of Defense for George W. Bush, retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. Sir, thank you so much for giving us your time tonight.
I am delighted to be with you, Andrew.
All right, so let's get into this. Many administrations have tried and many have failed to bring the North Koreans to the table. The Democrats and the media said Donald Trump's bluster, his tweets, Rocket Man, my button is bigger and it works, was going to bait us into World War III, was going to bait the North Koreans into launching missiles at us. Now they're ready to sit down and talk about denuclearizing, if that's even the proper way to say it. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, but it's not surprising, Andrew. Look, three previous presidents all said that a nuclear-armed North Korea was not acceptable, but today Kim has nuclear weapons and is almost to the point that he can deliver those to any place in America. It took a leader like Donald Trump to come forward and follow through on what he pledged to do when he was running as a candidate. He has taken a tough position with Kim Jong-un. He has made it very clear that we do have a credible military option, and if he doesn't come to terms with the fact that he's got to give up his nuclear program, it's going to result in an armed conflict. And I think that Kim Jong-un has taken that very seriously. God bless Donald Trump and the way he's handled this.
You know, isn't it amazing? I mean, the Democrats, the media, they said the same thing about Ronald Reagan. He was the affable dunce. He didn't know how to deal with the Russians. Strategic missile defense, Star Wars was going to kick off World War III. It was going to be a global thermonuclear war like in the movie War Games. And Ronald Reagan brought down the Soviet Union without firing a shot.
Yeah, let's reflect on the fact that one of the reasons Donald Trump was elected in the first place was because he's not a politician. He doesn't know the rules. He doesn't know how you're supposed to play this game. So he applies common sense. He applies his business rules. He applies the same principles that he's applied throughout his very successful career as a multi-billionaire businessman. And that is so unheard of in diplomatic circles that the media, as well as people within his own party, have been nothing but critical of him over his efforts here. And now we have at least brought Kim Jong-un to the table. It's not time for a victory lap. It's not over. And I think Kim has still got some surprises for us. But it had to be a guy like Trump that just really doesn't know what the diplomatic rules of engagement are. And he just used his common sense in getting us to this point now.
You know, in the Iran nuclear deal, I think everybody who's not Barack Obama agrees outsourcing inspections to Europeans with a 3-week waiting period pretty much means that the Iranians are going to do whatever the Iranians want to do. I guess we're all hoping the same mistake isn't made here, that if North Korea is going to give up its nuclear weapons program, it's going to have to seriously do it and be open to inspections.
Yeah, and you know, it gets worse with regards to what Kerry and President Obama did on this Iran deal. There's actually a provision in there for the Iranians to do their own inspections. Now think of that. You won't see that happen in these negotiations with Kim Jong-un. As a matter of fact, I think that Trump is going to walk into these talks and say, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about how you're going to disarm. After that, then we'll talk about what incentives might be available for you once you do that. And I don't think that you're going to see anything that looks at all like what we got out of the deal with Iran. In fact, just a point, Tillerson is leaving as Secretary of Defense because he could not come to grips with the fact that Donald Trump is serious about getting out of this very bad deal that ultimately is going to give the Iranians a nuclear weapon. And that's why Tillerson's not going to be the Secretary of State anymore, and Mike Pompeo is. You're not going to see this same thing happen in the negotiations with North Korea.
Let's talk real quick about China. Two things have happened. One, our economy is growing by leaps and bounds. And if it keeps growing, the trade deficit is going to start to shrink. And the Chinese are not going to be, rolling in American money. True, they hold a lot of our debt. But also, there was a story out of Punji-ri, a nuclear testing site in North Korea. There was evidently a collapse. They've been using a test site over and over again. There's now reports of mutated or birth defects amongst children in the area. So obviously some kind of material is leaking out. The Chinese now have to worry about their own safety. Let's be honest, the North Koreans are probably not the denizens of safety when it comes to testing nuclear weapons. If they were to misdetonate or accidentally detonate or have some kind of accident, the effects are going to be felt in China. So they have an incentive here.
Yeah, the Chinese just need to really pray that the wind is not blowing west or southwest during the next nuclear test. Look, how do you think we found out for sure, confirmed, that they had a nuclear program several years ago? It's because when you test a nuclear weapon, there is radiation leaks, and we have the technology to detect that, and that's exactly what we did. And the Chinese are very vulnerable. Every time there's a nuclear test, if that wind shifts, you have to know that radiation is coming your way, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't get away from it. You can't run from it.
All right. Real quick, last thing here. We once spoke about a special operations component if there was going to be any military action. You once said, and we're going to roll the clip, that was not a real option. What military options should be on the table if the North Koreans make an agreement and then break it?
Yeah, I think first of all, what we need to do is use some of these mother of all bombs and take out the artillery up on the DMZ to reduce the vulnerability to the South Koreans. The second thing we need to do is we need to have about probably 72 hours of just continuous airstrikes with bunker busting bombs to go in and try and take out the storage facilities, the production facilities, the launch sites, the missile storage, and everything associated with that. But most importantly, there needs to be a all-out effort to go after Kim himself. And the obvious problem with that is collateral damage. But look, I think that it's one of those things where we have to do what we have to do to save millions of lives in the long run. And that is, we've got to go after Kim and try and put one right down the pipe of wherever he is.
Well, let's hope to God it does not come to that. General Boykin, thank you so much for joining me. We'll have you back real soon.
I'd love to be with you, Andrew, and you're doing a great job. Thank you.